Hello, everybody. It's the Historical Gamer. You can call me Matt, and today I'm joined once again with the Strategy Wargamer. You can call him Jean, and we're back for episode number 22 of the Single Malt Strategy podcast. It's been a while since our last episode, but we did want to keep this thing going, and I know that, Jean, you've been playing some different games, and I've been playing a couple of different games since our last episode, and just kind of figured we'd have kind of more of a general talk. I know there's a game or two that are coming out that I've had some sort of preview copies for, and I know you've been really excited about some developments in sort of the iOS, surprise, surprise, iOS sort of crossover into more mainstream gaming with a game that's not strictly speaking a strategy game, but we'll probably end up talking about here tonight. But how you been doing? What's new with you?
Not much. I'm back in Virginia for at least for a few weeks, and been enjoying my El Wapo beer from O'Connor's, and nice little break from New Jersey and Brooklyn life. So everything up there is getting too freaking expensive. I'm just glad to be down here.
You got to get back down below the Mason-Dixon line. Is that it?
Get access to those nice Civil War battlefields. Forget about it.
Well, what have you been playing? I know, again, I'm trying to remember the last time we had an episode. It's got to have been over a month, but
I think it was when I was still up in Brooklyn. Yeah, so it's been a while. So I've been playing literally a shit ton of Hearts of Iron. I've been like literally grinding through Hearts of Iron 4 because I never really gave it much of a shot. If you listen to of our audience listen to previous podcasts, I usually I dabbed a little into it. But I started a video series where I did England's Last Stand kind of thing, like starting out in 1939. And I'm kind of like in a really bad spot now with France and the Low Countries all taken over. And I could tell you after spending a lot of hours playing this game, I have to admit that, it's every time I play it, I keep getting I really want to just go back to Hearts of Iron 3. Like, I feel like a lot of the stuff that I really enjoyed in Hearts of Iron is kind of taken out. I know you played it a little bit. You were saying you played for a couple dozen hours. The thing I wanted to ask you about this game is, and this seems, I don't know, maybe just a little critical, but like, in Hearts of Iron 3, there's a 2D map, right? Like when you zoom down on basically the map there, you get like a 2D top-down view. And Hearts of Iron 4, everything is like 3D, so it's hard to find where where the province begins and where the next one ends. Do you ever run into a problem like that?
No.
I guess I'm the only one.
Great discussion point. Hey, how do you feel about this? What?
Well, I don't know. There's a lot of things. All right, I'll go to strategy. I would have to say, like, so I kind of, I wouldn't say screwed up, but like, Germany kind of somehow kicked my ass out of Netherlands, and then Belgium, and then kicked my ass out of France, and so the whole British Army's back in England. Right, so I'm kind of surrounded, and the British Army in Africa is doing really shitty. So I don't know, like, I'm having a hard time with this game because usually I don't know if it's the way the game is kind of designed, but I'm not doing as well as if I played Hearts of Iron 3. I feel like in this game I have less options. Hearts of Iron 3, I can make militia units, like State Defense Force units. We have State Defense Force here. They're kind of like the militia in the States, and I know England has like the Home Guard. But like militias, I think, played a key role in World War II. And I feel like not being able to use them is kind of like screwing up my my whole strategy.
So, yeah, I don't know if I guess it depends on what you mean by militia. Like, National Guard units that are federalized and brought into the actual U.S. military are not militia units. They end up being equipped and trained and whatnot just the same as any regular unit. I guess you could say for the British, the Home Guard, but they didn't end up fighting at all, right? So, barring an invasion of England activating a whole bunch of local troops there, The Home Guard was kind of, I don't want to say useless because they played an important role, but they were not central to the combat, of the actual fighting that occurred during World War II. I don't think the French militia, if it existed, did anything. Obviously, they called up reserve units when the war started, but not in a traditional sort of militia sphere. I think really the only area that I can think of militia units playing a central role would be more of like in Eastern Europe in the partisans or maybe some of the French resistance, but they're not really militia units at that point. That's more, again, partisan units, not really home guard type forces, if you will. I mean, I'm not a huge World War II buff. I could be somewhat wrong there, but I really don't think quote unquote militia units played much of a role at all in World War II. Even the Volksgrad, whatever, the German old people brigades and young people brigades, I don't know if you can classify them as militia. Certainly lower quality troops, which Hearts of Iron does represent. I mean, you've got kind of entry-level conscript quality troops, and then you've got, regular units. But I can't think of sort of self-equipped militia units really having a role at all.
Well, I mean, they not on the front line, but I feel like as a reserve force in Hearts of Iron, like for example, like having. So I had to actually pull a couple of divisions off the front line. So I had to keep like maybe 4 infantry and a couple cavalry units in England just in case the Germans AI is just like, hey man, maybe if I just land in Scotland, I want to see how far I can go. So I had to keep some troops there to be like, all right, look, then they're probably not going to come, but just in case these guys wise up, I got to keep some troops here. So I had to keep like 4 to 6 divisions, and eventually I had to pull some to France to help out. But I have to keep troops there that otherwise I could throw on the front lines. Now that, if I had militia units that were just like, people that can't serve in the active duty forces, that I could produce very quickly, cost very little money. I could just have them guard London and the ports throughout England, and it's going to cost me little to nothing. And I know if the Germans decide to invade, they'll probably kick the ass of the militia, but it'll slow them down long enough for me to say, all right, freaking Germans landed in Scotland. Let me move some divisions from France to England. I would have the time to redeploy them for that just in case scenario. And I can't do that now, which drives me nuts.
How are the Germans landing in Scotland? Are they like jumping in tugboats and kind of just sailing across in onesie twosies, or like why? First of all, why are the Germans landing in Scotland of all places?
I don't know. So I'll be honest. Like if I was playing the Germans, that's what I would do. Like if I'm fighting in France, I would like try to like see who's in England. It's like holy crap, he just moved most of his army to France. He only has like 1 or 2 divisions there, and I don't know. I would try to. All right, this is me as the German player. I would be like, all right, I want to see if I can land in England. They would have to redeploy some of their forces in France and Belgium and Netherlands to England, which would make my invasion, in Europe a lot more easier, and actually gain some foothold in Britain. Now, of course, there's going to be supply issues, and the Royal Navy is going to cause a lot of problems. But I think it would at least lighten up the defenses in Western Europe for my armies to go across. And if I could hold a foothold, once I take over France, I could just, bulk up the Luftwaffe and the German Navy, fight the Royal Navy. Maybe I can, make a hole somehow and keep, making that bulge. Kind of do like a sea line kind of thing, but pre-fall of France kind of thing.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I know it's a game and all that, but the idea of moving my invasion force to basically sail right in front of the British home fleet's headquarters seems a little suicidal to me.
Well, I mean, what I would probably do is I would probably invade Norway first, right? Not even, well, maybe. But I think there is a way. There's a couple of times where I was able to sneak invasion forces past the main fleet. You just got to kind of like maybe put bait out, somehow put a bait on the western side of England, right? U-boats, whatever the core of the German Navy there, to entice the English Navy to come and engage them. While they are doing that, you can send transports with some destroyers, cruisers, and air support and land in eastern England. And then the English are going to be like, holy shit, we got to get some troops up there and, redeploy from France to there. And, I got some English land and, the French are like, holy shit, why are you sending forces out of here? And, this is not a good idea. And the whole, front line comes falling apart.
My hand has been in my face for the last 5 minutes or so. This whole plan of yours reminds me of when I was young. I had Axis and Allies Europe, the board game, and I didn't have a lot of people like to play board games with me. Most of my friends weren't really into it. I was more of like an athlete in high school, whatever. But I was really into history, so I had this Axis and Allies Europe board game, and I remember one of my friends and we sat down and we played it one night. And my friend was getting just overrun in Europe, and England was about to fall, and sort of as his last forlorn hope, he had built up this massive arsenal in the United States, a whole bunch of transports, tons of infantry, armor, all of these units, and he loads them up on these transports, and he sails them across the Atlantic. And as he's moving across the Atlantic, what he failed to do was realize that I had like 20 submarines. He had no escorts, and I wiped out in his entire, hundreds of industrial points worth of units. Just wiped his whole invasion force out with submarines because he decided to launch an amphibious invasion without escort and military vessels. They were all transports. And I just imagine you having this, massive German naval armada about to sail across the ocean in Hearts of Iron, and you're trying to invade England before you've conquered France and just getting your whole force wiped out without any contest whatsoever.
There was a couple, I think in Victoria too, I think I did something similar to that where I think going up against England. Yeah, this is what happened. I remember it was like 1840 or something. I went to war with England. And obviously English Navy in the 1840s is just, king of the hill, And I managed to get the English Navy to engage my my main fleet, while a secondary fleet came up from the northern part of by Scotland. I literally landed troops on in Scotland, and I kind of got pounded on pretty bad. I remember I landed 125,000, and then I got up to the bottom of Scotland, maybe halfway to England, and then they had a massive army of 250,000, and there was no way to retreat those guys because, obviously the English Navy destroyed my main battle fleet. And I figured I was just going to be able to walk to London because I didn't do recon because obviously how am I going to do recon? I need Navy to do that. And, I was kind of hoping that they wouldn't have a large force there, and I was kind of wrong, but, at least, but the good thing about it is at least I was able to land on England and, challenge the British army, which was kind of fun. And it was interesting, even though I got my ass kicked.
Yeah. Okay. So Hearts of Iron, have you played the new expansion? Did you buy?
I was about to buy it. I wanted to see how much the new 1.5 update, which is Cornflakes, it updated the commander system. So you could add corps commanders, army commanders you have now, and you have what's above the army? You have army group, and then so you could add commanders to all these. But the two things really bother me. Besides the stuff that I already mentioned. One, if you're playing the U.S. in 1936. And you be able to make Eisenhower a field marshal in 1936, there's a problem there. I think Eisenhower in 1936 was a colonel. Automatically you can make him commander of all the armies, which doesn't make sense. I think one of the beautiful things Hearts of Iron 3 had was you can promote one of your commanders to brigade and then follow them along their career from brigade commander division commander to corps commander to army commander, and do that as they build up points and stuff like that. And the other thing is when you're switching between the land, Air Force, and Navy kind of screens, I feel like sometimes I'm getting like a freaking like my brain's on fire because like all the neon colors. I feel like half the time I'm gonna like I have a brain aneurysm because it's going from like green, bright orange, and then it flips over to like bright neon. And like my brain is kind of like almost at a point where it's about to like fry out because all the neon colors. I really like.
I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead.
It really bothers me. I don't know. It might not bother most of you, but I can tell you, going between like the Army, Navy, and the Air Force screens, those colors are driving me nuts.
You're making Hearts of Iron sound like it's straight out of Tron or something.
Oh, I feel that's what it is. I feel like I'm in Tron right there. It just like I guarantee you, there's a blue in Tron that's blue in Hearts of Iron. I guarantee you a lot of those colors can be found there.
All right. Well, I did purchase it. It's Waking the Tiger, which the thing I really liked about it is that it really gives an emphasis to China and World War II, which I don't think gets enough. We in the West do not talk about that portion of the conflict, which is basically the Russian front of the Pacific Theater. And, I was glad to see it to get some attention. I haven't played it as much as I kind of was planning to yet. I played a couple of one multiplayer game and a little bit of sort of my own playthrough and got absolutely stomped on as China, which is about what should have happened. But it's something I want to come back to and spend a little bit more time on, and maybe down the line, if you pick it up, we could do an episode on it. But sounds like you've been playing a fair bit of Hearts of Iron. Anything else you've been playing lately?
Probably an old game. Well, probably two other games I would like to mention. One is Starbase Orion because it's a classic. It's been around for like a decade. I think we talked about it one time, and it's on the iPad. This game, I think the developer's still pushing out updates for it. I think it was just a couple of months ago he pushed out an update. This game is really old. I remember when I bought my first iPhone or iPad, whatever, back in 2010. The game was like out in 2010, so it's a really old game. It was originally designed for the original iPad and like iPhone 3G, which most of you guys probably don't even remember. So I still play that game because it has a lot of replay value. The AI is pretty good in it. I was always hoping that they were going to make a sequel, and there were rumors that he was making it, but somehow it just dropped. And the other game I wanted to get ready for, so I've been playing a little bit more, is Panzer Corps on iPad. So I've been catching up on that. So that's a game that I really do enjoy. I think it's still available for sale on the iPad, right?
I'm not sure if Panzer Corps is available for sale on the iPad still or not. You're talking about since the apocalypse?
But the thing is like, well, Apple has a reason for everything. But the thing is like, I know like between the adpocalypse and I noticed that Slitherine is, they do still release games for the iPad. Not as many, but they still do release. I think we talked about it over Twitter, or even before the podcast started, we were mentioning how like Slitherine and Matrix is they're kind of like taking not a full step back, but like a half step back from the App Store marketplace for iPad and iPhone. And I think you were mentioning before because they were doing that because it's not a viable market, you think?
I mean, I don't have any... Let me be clear. I have no inside information on why Slitherine is kind of stepping back. I will say my understanding is I've seen a few posts from Ian, who I think was kind of made some comments to the effect of, several years ago they really bet heavily on iOS to sort of be a really big growth opportunity for them. They've seen steady growth in the PC space, but iOS, at least in the way their business model works anyway, they kind of plateaued. And didn't really develop in the way that I think they were hoping it would. Again, this is really just based off of sort of some of the comments that they've shared publicly, both on their in their forums on like Matrix's or Slytherine's forums, and I think one or two things at like Home of the Wargamers a few years ago or something to that effect. I haven't seen anything. So there's a new game coming out called March to Glory, which is being made by Shenandoah Studio, which Shenandoah was kind of always the mobile focus studio that they released, quote unquote, hit games. on iOS for like Drive on Moscow and Battle of the Bulge, and these are some of the early strategy gaming classics, if you will, if that's the right word to use, on iOS. And I haven't seen anything about March to Glory coming to iPad. If you go to the Matrix website anyway, it just says platform PC. So that's kind of interesting because, again, all of Shenandoah's other games, I think all of the other games have all been available on iPad, as well as I think Battle of the Bulge is also on Xbox One. But for March to Glory, if you go to their website, it just says PC, which is interesting because I have a preview copy for it, and I've been playing it a little bit, and I think it would fit well as a PC game, as a mobile game. I'm not so sure I'm sold on it as a as a PC game, but as an iOS game, it kind of looks like it would be interesting to kind of play through. But to me, if your studio that you basically resurrected from bankruptcy, which was built on mobile gaming, is making a game that isn't a mobile game, then I don't know if that bodes well for the studio's focus in the future. Like, to me, that says Slitherine's not really emphasizing mobile gaming if their mobile gaming studio's releasing a game that looks like it would be mobile. It's built on Unity, so it's ideal for mobile, and it just doesn't apparently at this time, at launch anyway, appear to be going to mobile.
And I think like Shenandoah is like, we were talking about this before on Twitter, and how I feel is more like an in-name only company. Like you sent me over an article. I don't know how you found it, but it was actually really interesting to read. It was from September 16, 2015. It's at mcvuk.com, and how they were talking about how when they purchased Shenandoah Studios, the new studio now is located, I think, in Romania, and how it's a big difference. It's a brand new crew. They only brought a few people over from the original studio, which was located in Philly, because I remember I stopped by there one time. I feel like it's in name only. Like a lot of some of the design is kind of brought over, because I was watching your feed for the March to Glory, I think you were mentioning. So I was watching that, and it has a lot of that feel of Battle of the Bulge. And I just wanted, what did you think about playing that game? I watched a little bit of it, and I plan to get a copy of the game myself and give it a go and see how it works. But I wanted to hear how you felt about that game for the PC.
I'm still kind of playing through it and trying to figure out what I really, what I genuinely think about it. What I will say is I have some reservations. So it's an interesting turn-based strategy game which puts you sort of in a Napoleonic world. And overall, I think it does some interesting things. But I think while the game does a really good job of modeling some key challenges of the Napoleonic world, like how do you make sure that infantry, cavalry, and artillery, how do you play to all of their strengths? How do you, avoid their weaknesses? How you can use cavalry to move forward to cause an infantry unit to change into square and then bombard that square with artillery and absolutely devastate it. These are relevant tactics that are reasonably well modeled in the game. Some of it I'm not sure how historically accurate, if you care about that, the way the gameplay works, because, for example, squares are way too weak, I've found. And again, I'm playing a beta version, so maybe things will be tweaked and modified in the launch version. But I've found cavalry can still effectively attack squares, which seems bizarre to me. And I think the gameplay is interesting, but it's a little bit superficial, and that's because Napoleonic warfare was really all about maneuver. And the game maps are really small, so there's really no maneuvering and flanking and grand sweeping, sort of Austerlitz-type movements. It's really about moving your army from the left side of the map to the right side of the map and bashing your army into the enemy until the enemy breaks and is destroyed. It doesn't feel like it's a Napoleonic battlefield to me, other than sort of the aesthetics. Flanking fire, for example, seems to be really toned down. Cavalry's disadvantage against square seems to be really toned down. Long story short, I think it's an interesting game, and I think it's something that would fit well on iPad, although, again, it doesn't appear to be headed that way. But I don't get the sense that it really is a game about the Napoleonic battles. And the other weird thing is the game has 14 different historical Napoleonic battles that it claims to represent, but in no way does it feel like I'm fighting the actual battle. I fought Austerlitz, which is the first of the campaign battles, and it is not Austerlitz. It's not. The Pratzen Heights has no significance in this battle. The map has some historical ties to the actual battlefield, but one of your key objectives is the town of Austerlitz, which at least my reading of history played very little significance in the battle. It was just sort of a nearby town. Assaulting the Pratzen Heights is not really a thing. Yeah, there's terrain and there's hills and things like that, but it does not feel like the Battle of Austerlitz in a way that something like Breakaway Games' old game, Austerlitz Napoleon's Last Battle, really brought the battlefield to life, brought the tactics to life. Flanking fire was important. Cavalry attacking squares were mincemeat, and it felt much more like a battle that was modeling a specific Napoleonic fight. And to me, the game is more about ensuring that you're attacking units in the right order. So, all right, I've got an enemy unit here. My units are moved up against it. I should hit it with cavalry first, then artillery, and then send the infantry in to finish. That kind of a sequencing, it feels more like a puzzle game to me than it does a war game that's trying to model historical Napoleonic tactics. And in that sense, that's why I feel like it fits better on mobile, because it's easy to pick up and play for a little bit and then set down. But again, it doesn't seem to be, at least in the initial sort of what they've publicized in their initial intent to make it a mobile game.
Yeah, I mean, that's oh wow.
And I think I might be a little. I mean, I think what I've just said may come off as more negative than I intended to. I'm actually enjoying my time playing the game quite a bit. I think there's some interesting puzzles to uncover on how you win each of the different battles, but it doesn't feel to me like it's modeling any particular Napoleonic fight in any meaningful way. I play Austerlitz and I win that. It doesn't feel like Austerlitz. I load up the next battle, which is Jena Austerlitz, and again, it doesn't feel like it's that battle. It doesn't feel like I'm fighting the Battle of Jena Austerlitz. It just, the countries I'm fighting with and the map superficially sort of represents that fight, but it's not, it isn't that battle. It isn't portraying the challenges that Napoleon faced at Austerlitz or that Deveau faced at, I believe it was Jena, and then, or was Napoleon at Jena and Deveau was at Austerlitz? These are twin battles that Napoleon defeated a portion of the Prussian army, and one of his marshals defeated another portion of the main portion of the Prussian army, and the game doesn't seem to model that. In my initial impressions, again, I've only put 6 or 7 hours into it. Maybe there's some of these fights will kind of open up more as I kind of dive into them a little bit more, but that's my initial thoughts.
Is there multiplayer?
It does or will have multiplayer. I think it comes out in a couple of days. Actually, by the time we post this, I'm sure it will have come out. But it does have multiplayer, yes.
Yeah, maybe they'll, in beta tweak it a little bit. Probably a little bit more, and I guess with updates and expansion packs and stuff like that. Does it feel a lot of? The gaming system, does it feel like Battle of the Bulge kind of thing?
It looks like Battle of the Bulge aesthetically. I think the thing that Battle of the Bulge and Drive on Moscow both did a good job was really making you feel like time was important, and that you had certain key decisions you had to make around what, especially in Battle of the Bulge, which units am I going to move? Where am I going to move them? I have a handful of turns to make these moves. And so it really was really demonstrating the importance of time and prioritization, and in a way that was relevant to the Battle of the Bulge. The battles in March to Glory are, 20 plus turn, hearing myself echo. Okay, that stopped. That was bizarre. The battles in in March to Glory are 20-plus turn strategy battles where time doesn't matter. Like, there's no... I think Jana Austerlitz could be an interesting fight because one of those battles involved a highly outnumbered French corps holding off against superior Prussian forces and then counterattacking. And to me, that sort of time management game could play an important role in some Napoleonic fights where maybe you're playing as the French and you're waiting for, this would be ahistorical, but maybe you're waiting for reinforcements to show up and then you can go on the counteroffensive. So making key decisions in a limited period of time, but that's not how March to Glory works. And so it looks like the Battle of the Bulge games, but it lacks, I think, some of the charm that those games had, because really it's just a turn-based game about sort of min-maxing which units should attack where in what sequence, and battlefield tactics are largely secondary.
Damn. Well, I mean, do you think with an expansion pack or update they can reformat it?
Maybe. I mean, if unit facing and flanking and whatnot is given more importance, but again, there's no real room to maneuver on these maps. So, I mean, again, I've only played 3 or 4 maps. This isn't a comprehensive review by any impression, but I guess my view of the way Austerlitz was handled was so kind of not what I was hoping for, that I think it's coloring sort of my overall sort of sentiments here. But I do think it looks a little bit like Field of Glory, actually, Field of Glory 2 also. And I wouldn't be surprised if they add battle packs. The 14 battles are kind of the key Central European engagements from during Napoleon's reign as emperor. So they don't really touch on the Italian campaign. They don't touch on the Peninsula campaign. They don't touch on Egypt or any of the famous battles during Napoleon's rise. So I could very well see a DLC pack, which is about the rise of Napoleon, looking at his campaigns in Italy and maybe some of the earlier Revolutionary War battles, or the Peninsula campaign from the British point of view. All of the campaign battles in this game are fought from the French point of view. So you could do a British campaign during the Peninsula. They have an interesting sort of storyline mechanic where, at the beginning of each briefing for each battle, you're kind of following one French soldier as he progresses through his story that he's telling you, but it has no real bearing on the battle. It's just sort of a nice little, storytelling mechanic around this person that you're supposedly following, but again plays no real role in the fight.
Let me ask some so like, for example, let's say you fight one battle. Do your losses carry on to the next battle? And does that, like, if you lose a battle that you're supposed to win in history, is there like a what if kind of scenario kind of thing?
Not that I've seen. It's just a straight progression, and the units are the same battle to battle. You do have the ability to reward experience to certain units so that you choose which units you want to be your more experienced units at the start of the fight, but at least in the beta version of the game, there's no carryover mechanic of that. So it's not like the units I reward with experience in one fight carry experience over to the next fight. At least that's not what I've seen to this point.
So if a unit uses like 50% of its force, they're 100% on the next scenario.
No, but I don't think that necessarily should, because, again, you're looking at 14 different battles, but the battles range from 1805 to 1815. So should a unit that loses a bunch of casualties in the Battle of Leipzig be weaker in the Battle of Waterloo? Well, no, because Leipzig occurred 2 years before Waterloo, and Napoleon was ousted from power before, between them, and it was a completely different army. So I don't think that's necessarily the right way to go about linking it. Certainly it is something they could do, but isn't something that I think would really, I don't think it would add any value. If they were more tightly focused campaigns, like if it was the sort of the Austrian campaign in 1809, the Wagram campaign, or the German campaign looking at Dresden and Leipzig and whatnot of 1813, or the French campaign of the invasion of France in 1814, which often gets overlooked, but is probably one of Napoleon's finest campaigns he ever fought, despite the fact that it ended in a defeat. Or the 100 Days campaign. If it was more tightly focused, something like that might make sense. but it's really not. It's just a progression of battles that Napoleon fought that you get to play through.
So in terms of Napoleon, just in a historical aspect, if you had a position, like if you were commenting on his strategic operations, if you had like a rate him as a commander, 10 being like, I'm trying to think of a good commander, best commander of all time, I'm going to say, I'm going to take a shot in the dark here. I'm going to say, damn, I can't think of someone right offhand. All right, I'll say Patton. Patton was an incredible commander. So let's say, Patton's, great strategist, great tactician. If you had to compare Napoleon on a scale from 1 to 10, where would you put him in terms of, all his battles, his invasion of Russia and all
that? Napoleon outstrips Patton without a doubt. It's not even close. I don't know where Napoleon rates in history. Patton was certainly a great bulldog of a commander, but I wouldn't rate him as one of the top 10 generals of all time or anywhere close to that. No, I mean straightforward, hard fighting, but not exactly a tactical, brilliant commander as far as anything that was demonstrated. He may have been, but he didn't really get a chance to show any of that off.
I think that's what a lot of generals need. A lot of generals lack, like, if you say Sherman was an incredible commander, but, and as much as I love the commander, Sherman, there was one thing inherent to him where he was always worried that he was going to, find himself in a bad position. So he kind of almost second guessed everything that he was going to do. Patton never second guessed himself. Patton was just like, we're going to hit him. We're going to keep hitting him. Hit. There was no defense with Patton. I remember he had a quote, it was just like, there is no such thing as defense. There is only offense. And I think that is one of the key.
When you're commanding the United States military forces in World War II, you have that luxury.
Well, no,
I don't think World War II, from a Western Allied perspective, was replete with great sweeping tactical military maneuvers. And Patton did not operate in that way. I think the sort of maneuver warfare that Napoleon operated under in his time frame, I think the ability for that kind of grand scale maneuver probably ended with the beginning of World War I. I think warfare substantially changed from sort of the Napoleonic era and anything that came after it. I don't know how effectively you can really compare commanders. Was Patton a great leader? Sure, certainly. Was he a tactically brilliant commander? I don't know if someone in his position in World War II ever really had the ability to demonstrate that kind of brilliance. I think battlefield tactics are certainly possible at the company or battalion or maybe even regimental or brigade level. But I think once you get beyond that, in sort of the industrialized massive scale of the world wars, I don't know if you really ever had that opportunity. I mean, Patton didn't have anything like the Ulm campaign where Napoleon completely outclassed his Austrian opponents, outflanked them using neutral countries, and destroyed a 70,000-man Austrian army while losing 2,000 French soldiers. And the argument could be made his opponents were incompetent, certainly, but at the end of the day, that kind of sweeping and complete total victory with almost no cost, what did Patton ever do that would equal that? The breakout? Maybe no. That was punching a hole in the lines of exhausted German divisions and racing into a vacuum.
Reaching the 101st during the Battle of the Bulge, pushing his troops to the limit. I thought that was really great thing. And
okay, what was his Austerlitz? What was his Jana Austerdet? What was his any number of other battles of Napoleon's entire campaign in Italy? I don't think they're comparable.
Kind of thing.
What?
If you would have to rate military commanders, probably put him at a 10.
Ooh, Napoleon at a 10?
Yeah.
I don't know. Are you rating their leadership? Are you rating their tactics? Are you rating their strategy? I think Napoleon, in some sense, is kind of a complete package in that he's a great leader, inspires his men, brilliant tactician, and incredibly effective strategist outside of the sort of national political level where he fails miserably. But Patton didn't really operate in a political landscape, and when he did, he kind of, demonstrated an inability to cooperate with allies and adversaries on a political level. Eisenhower might have been one of the most effective at that, but was Eisenhower a great tactician? Well, I don't know. He never really operated at a tactical level. I just don't think 20th century commanders compare well because the conflicts get so big that individual commanders very rarely have the ability to show off their talents at each one of those different traits.
The one couple of people I come to mind for me would, I understand, I don't follow Napoleon a lot, so I'm not familiar with all his battles and all his strategies. I remember having conversations about his battle at Auschwitz. One of my friends was telling me how magnificent it was and such. But I've never played it out. That's why I was really excited about this game because I would be able to see like the kind of be able to play.
If you want to feel what Napoleon's battle at Austerlitz was like in a approachable and tactical way, try and figure out how to get breakaway games. Austerlitz, Napoleon's greatest victory. Try and figure out how to get that to play somewhere.
Is this abandonware?
I don't know. I bought it when it was, in stores, but that was like 10 plus years ago. It's built on the Sid Meier's engine. Sid Meier Gettysburg engine.
Okay. I'm going to have to give that a try because, there's a lot of hype about Napoleon, but, I don't know. I regard people like Patton and, Nathaniel Greene and Israel Putnam, people like that. And, of course, Winfield Scott Hancock, people like that really, like, I don't know, I felt like projected a lot more. But then again,
right, Americans. Literally every single person you just mentioned.
That's true. I guess it's probably because my head is deep into the sand of American conflicts. I got to get a little bit more into, foreign nations. Napoleon would probably be a good place to start.
Them foreigners, they don't know how to fight.
No, I mean, I know a little bit about the British Army during the American Revolution, but that's only because it was the American Revolution.
Yeah, the bad guys, those incompetent bad guys.
The lobster backs.
Oh, boy. I don't think 20th century fighting compares well at a army level because they're just not operating at the same level. Again, Patton doesn't have the same even opportunity to shine in the way that Napoleon did. Napoleon and Wellington are easy to compare from a battlefield analysis. If you want to look at the American Civil War fighting, that probably compares more favorably if you're trying to compare generals to sort of Napoleonic figures, or the Mexican-American War. Certainly you can compare those kind of maneuvers and campaigns, and I think by the time you get to the 20th century, things just get too big. One actor does not have the ability to single-handedly mastermind Austerlitz. The thing about Austerlitz was it was such a chess match, and Napoleon just so clearly outclassed his opponents throughout that entire fight. Timing was so critical. Getting in the enemy's head and making them think you were doing one thing when you were doing another. Like when other than sort of the grand deception before Normandy, which certainly was not even Patton's idea, when would Patton really ever have that chess match with a German general? When? Pretty much never, because he wasn't in that sort of a role either. To be fair, but anyway, I think we're kind of getting off topic here.
That one thing. The other general that I was very impressed with, that is non-American general, I would say is probably one of the top commanders, was Grigory Zhukov. Some of the strategies and strategies that he did in World War II were really shocking, really magnificent. Like Stalingrad was really something that really turned a lot of people's heads was he played. I felt like in that war he played both Stalin and Hitler against each other, and used their weaknesses as his strengths. And I thought that was. Me and my friend were talking about that the other day, and we were just talking about how incredible a tactician he was.
Speaking of Zhukov, have you seen The Death of Stalin?
I was thinking about it, but it's a comedy, right? It's not like I'm not going to learn.
It's a dark comedy.
Oh,
I've heard very good things about it.
Have you seen it?
I have not. I probably won't see it in theaters, but when it comes out, I'm going to be all over that. I really want to see that. It looks hilarious, but I think they do a decent job of telling the historical story in a sort of darkly humorous sort of way.
I would love, so the movies that I really love enjoying watching is maybe a lot of our listeners have watched these, but I want more of these across the wars. Movies like Tora, Battle of the Bulge. And yeah, there's some historical inaccuracies in those movies, but I felt.
Don't they use like M48 tanks or something, or M60s? They use some modern tank at the time.
Yeah, it's not going to be 100% accurate, but I felt it was not. I mean, obviously, it's not a documentary.
The German tanks were like M48s or something like that, and the American tanks were the Chaffee, which existed but was certainly not the backbone of U.S. military at the time.
Yeah, Shermans were at the time, I think.
Yeah,
and some Stuarts, I think.
I think the Stuart was being phased out by that time for the Chaffee, but certainly you wouldn't take a Stuart with its 30mm gun up against a Tiger or a Panther or anything.
But I mean, like, those are the kind of movies I want to see more of. I don't want to see like a dark comedy on like Stalin. I want to give me a dark drama about Stalin. With that actor.
Okay, I was about to say you don't want to see anything about Stalin, that foreigner. I want an American movie about Americans.
No, I mean, I'll be honest. Like, there's some movies that, and yes, I kind of lean toward American conflicts because I'm in America and I have a passion for Civil War, American Revolution. One movie that a lot of people probably never are not familiar with. I don't even think it's on iTunes. It's called The Crossing with Jeff Daniels.
Yeah, I used to watch that a ton when I was, I think it came out when I was in like middle schoolers.
Yeah, and I remember when I was like, I went to the VHS store like JAF in Brooklyn, and I was walking in and I was like, what the heck is this movie? I was picking up on VHS back in the day when VHS was the thing, and I remember putting it in my VCR and watching the whole movie. I was like, this is awesome. This is incredible. And if our listeners have never seen it, it's about the Battle of Trenton from the American point of view, and it's a drama, and it's incredible. Jeff Daniels plays George Washington incredibly, the best I've ever seen anyone portray George Washington.
You know what I'll say is it was an A&E movie, by the way. There was a period of time in the late 90s, early 2000s, A&E was pouring crazy amounts of money into high production value, historical or sort of quasi-historical things, because this came out within a year or two, or maybe it was just before the Horatio Hornblower miniseries with Ioan Gruffudd, however you pronounce his name, where they turned the first Horatio Hornblower novel into 4 episodes, and then they did it 2 more times with the next 2 books in the series. They built a 700-ton, 20-gun ship from scratch, like an actual Age of Sail 20-gun ship, for a freaking TV miniseries. Like, that is, and again, I mean, that's, I don't even know, does A&E even still exist? But I mean, they certainly at that period of time were doing a lot in sort of that vein. And yeah, it was a good TV show, or it was a good movie, The Crossing. I remember watching it a whole bunch of times. We
don't have those things today. Like, I mean, we have like another movie that's coming out is 12 Rise. That movie with the what was it? It's on just hit iTunes. It's called 12, The Lonely 12.
I don't know.
Hold on. It's I'm on the iTunes store. I was thinking about picking it up, and it's 12 Strong. It's about the U.S. Special Forces team following 9/11. Captain Mitch Nelson are chosen to be the first U.S. troops in Afghanistan for an extremely dangerous mission. So I guess this is like the moment we got into Afghanistan following 9/11. And, the trailer shows like these soldiers on horseback charging Al-Qaeda and Taliban forces, which, it seems cool, but like, and, it puts a spotlight on these heroes, but I would love more Civil War, more American Revolution, War of 1812, or Texan War for Independence dramas. Like back like 10, 15 years ago, we had another movie called, I think, The Alamo. I think Billy Bob Thornton was in it, I think. And
Isn't
that was
terrible.
Which one?
Isn't that terrible?
I enjoyed it. I even bought it, and I'm very cheap with when I buy my. It's with Dennis Quaid and Billy Bob Thornton. It came out in 2004. I don't know. I liked it, and it got a score of 6 out of 10 on IMDb.
Anyway, I think we're going kind of far afield at this point. But yeah, anyway, long story short, I think Death of Stalin looks interesting. I know you're not necessarily interested in a dark comedy or whatnot of the Death of Stalin, but hey, I think you should check it out. I'm going to check it out. I've heard really positive things about it. It has a pretty impressive cast in it as well. The guy who's in your new Star Trek series is in it. What's his name? He plays he's in Harry Potter. He plays Lucius Malfoy's dad or whatever.
Captain Lorca.
Yeah, he's I think he's Zukov.
Yeah, he is. So I'm kind of curious. I know you're watching up on the Star Trek stuff, Star Trek Discovery. Are you enjoying it? I know you got the trial.
I haven't actually watched it yet. I've been watching sort of gone back and started watching Jag, which I watched a ton of when I was young. And I was like, I've got it. All right, I'll go back and see how corny as hell this 1990s TV show was and how it holds up. And I was stunned at how much actual footage they literally just rip from like actual Hollywood movies, which apparently was okay because, the company that ran them, I guess, owned the rights or whatever. But like, I don't know. It's I haven't gotten to Star Trek yet.
I know the first season of JAG is like literally everything is ripped off because the U.S. Navy didn't want to work with JAG during the first year, but after the second year, I think it was the second year, they started letting the Navy and JAG work closely, so you'll see them on actual ships and stuff like that. But they realized it was a good recruiting tool. But I don't know. I like JAG, but if you notice as you're going through them, it's not like the full seasons. Like season 3 is like you get 4 or 5 episodes, and the next season you get like 3, and it's like. I don't understand why CBS did that. Like, why can't you just upload the whole bloody season? Like,
too much bandwidth.
Like, I don't understand. Like, they have all these other shows, full seasons of it, but like JAG is all sparsed out. It's just like I felt like they were like, hey, you know what? We have 20 episodes of JAG that we kind of like digitized, like last year, and they're like, well, yeah, just put that up. It's like, should I do the rest? Nah, don't worry about it. Take the weekend off. Okay, no problem. And I felt like that's what they did.
Maybe people are still buying like copies. I don't know. The whole first season's of that.
Yeah. I mean, the first season's there, but I mean, like the good episodes start on season 2, so it's like, I don't know. I just but I'm telling you, I think you're gonna really love Star Trek. This is by far the best first season, if not the best season of Star Trek I've ever watched in my entire life.
In any event, I think we've sailed well off out of, we claim to be single malt strategy all the time, only strategy. And I think we've sailed far off into the blended sort of discount liquor section of the strategy aisle where you're not even sure if there's any strategy in here. It's all pop culture references. So pulling us back a little bit. So I talked about March to Glory. You kind of talked about Hearts of Iron and a couple of other things that you're playing. Have you looked into Panzer Corps 2 at all?
I was looking at it. I was looking at the feature list that they were pushing out for Panzer Corps, and I really enjoyed some of the things that they were planning to put in here. trying to pick up the article. So there was some really cool stuff that I even posted on my Twitter. I just wish I wrote it down. Hold on, give me 1 second here.
Yeah, I've actually got it up right here, and I think this is. I'm kind of torn on this. So Panzer Corps 2, which is the sequel, obviously, to Panzer Corps 1, which was sort of a spiritual remake of Panzer-General, sort of one of the all-time classics of strategy gaming, has announced some features which I think are worth discussing because I kind of wonder if it's really going to be a Panzer Corps game. Panzer Corps was sort of this turn-based World War II game that lets you play a campaign from the beginning of the war to the end of the war, with sort of this dynamic, an element of dynamic branching campaign where if you're really successful in one place, more so than history, you can get an ahistorical scenario like invading England or invading the United States. If you play roughly on par with history, then you kind of follow the historical path of World War II. And if you play worse, and this game's campaign is typically from the German perspective, although there's add-ons to let you play as like the Allies. If you play worse than history, then you may get canned and never see the end of the war. But Panzer Corps 2 seems to be sort of, first off, they've said that the campaign itself they're going to be using dynamic maps, which I'm kind of confused by. But they say they're going to be doing historical battles. May have some issues, and I'm reading from a Wargamer.com article, because their intention is to use dynamic maps, which, okay, that's interesting. Obviously, if you're trying to represent World War II and the invasion of Poland, and the map is dynamic, or procedurally generated, then how are you going to make sure Warsaw is where Warsaw is, or how are you going to make sure that you're actually fighting through World War II? They've said they don't want to simply replicate the grand campaign model from Panzer Corps. It's been done multiple times, and they're kind of concerned whether people would respond to that, which I kind of understand. But is it really going to be a Panzer Corps game if the map is randomly generated? They're bringing a supply system to Panzer Corps, which I think is a good improvement. They're going to have an overrun and an encirclement campaign mechanic, which I think is absolutely critical. Like if you're trying to represent armored warfare and breakthroughs and all of that, I think that's important. That's something that sort of Order of Battle has had for several years, which is sort of another Matrix game, which took some of what I think works well in Panzer Corps and sort of enhances it. And this seems like they're sort of adopting that, which I think is good. Supply is going to obviously be important, and sort of your armored columns being able to cut other units off, I think, is really important. I think, and this was something you mentioned being really excited about, it's interesting you're going to be able to split units up. So, like, you can have one unit and then split it into two weaker units that might have, that you can divide up and then recombine them.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think the biggest thing, which is going to make it an overnight success, at least for, in my point of view, is the supply system. I think supply is critical in every single war, obviously from the Revolutionary War all the way to modern day, right? So, and especially in World War II, a lot of games don't do this, where you cut off the supply and the enemy units still are fighting at 100% capacity. It's just like, well, how are they getting their fuel? How are they getting their supplies? How are they getting their ammo? And they're building this in. I think this is huge. And just by that supply system, not even to mention all the other goodies that are coming in, that's it for me, an instant buy. Like right there, supply system with overrun and encirclement combat mechanics. I'm like, instant buy right there, no problem. Because that little piece will make the whole game incredible.
Yeah, I think it's a good enhancement. I'm a little bit, I think maybe harder to please in that sense because Order of Battle already has that, and with the expansions they've had, they move into the European theater as well. I think the other pieces that are really interesting are the air combat mechanic, where every single airplane is tied to a specific airfield that's a hex on the map, and you can attack an enemy airfield, cause damage, destroy the airfield, cause units to run out of fuel or ammo. Like, bases matter now, right? Like, in the past, if you had a strategic bomber, you could cause the enemy to lose some prestige by bombing their cities, but there was really no purpose to bombing an airfield or to attacking an enemy airfield or, using tactical aircraft against bases. That didn't exist. Well, now you can attack airfields, potentially damage airfields, destroy airfields, and I'm hoping that means strategic or tactical aircraft have more use than just being close air support or interdiction aircraft. So that's really exciting. That will substantially change the way that air combat is modeled. And I think the idea of tying aircraft to specific airfields is also intriguing. I think it'll add some challenges as you advance beyond your ability to support your Air Force. I'm assuming there will be limits on range if you're tying aircraft to a specific airfield. Maybe not, but in either case, I think that piece is really exciting because I don't think Order of Battle does that either. You know, you can land aircraft and destroy aircraft on the field if they're on the ground, but you can't actually destroy an airfield. So that is really interesting. They've also mentioned that some campaign battles will be land only or naval only, which I think could be intriguing. Again, Order of Battle kind of has that for some of their expansions, but if that's built into the overall campaign, I think it'll be interesting, but I wonder how that impacts like your core units, because one of the concepts behind Panzer Corps is you get this core of units that you build up and enhance, and they gain experience as you fight battle to battle, and you've got to replenish them. They can be destroyed, but essentially you carry this core of units through the whole war, and they get better and better over time, and you upgrade their equipment and all of that. And if you have some battles that are only air or some that are only naval, like if you have a naval battle and you're playing as Germany, probably only going to have one or two of those. Is that just like a side battle that really your core is sort of excluded from altogether, and then casualties don't matter? Like, you know, one of the big challenges with Panzer Corps is always figuring out, like, how do I make sure my core units fight, but I don't want them to lose too many casualties, so I kind of use auxiliary units that aren't part of this core a little bit more haphazardly and kind of try and nurture my core units. Well, if there's some battles that don't include those because it's naval only, like, what does that look like? And I think another really interesting piece is they're having a tech progression system, which will allow you to get prototypes in your army before they're readily available. So, like, maybe the Tiger tank isn't ready yet, but you get a prototype of the Tiger tank, and ahead of the actual historical production date. And what I think is absolutely fascinating about this is supposedly, depending on how that unit performs and how you use them in combat, the final mass-produced version, which you'll get in a following battle, could be changed or tweaked or have different sort of perks or bonuses or penalties based on how the unit's prototype performs, which I think is really interesting and adds sort of a dynamic nature to the actual units in the game. Because if I use my Tiger tank in one way that was different than history, it may be a different type of a tank than the Tiger was. Again, it kind of gets a little bit ahistorical, but it's also an interesting, I think, compelling piece to the game that I think will be a welcome change. I was really worried about Panzer Corps 2 just being a rehash. The other piece is the game is in 3D, which I don't care much about, but whatever. The game's in 3D, it'll look pretty, it'll look great, but I was worried it was just going to be, all right, well, let's take Panzer Corps, let's put it in 3D. It's the same game you've been playing for 20 plus years, dating back to Panzer-General, and now let's sell it. And it seems like they're making a substantial effort to make this game not just another rehash of an already existing, sort of gameplay. I'm really a little bit uneasy with the idea of dynamic, procedurally generated maps as far as the campaign is concerned, because one of the things that really appeals to me is going from the start of World War II to the end of it, fighting that out and building my core. I don't know how they're going to handle that, and I think, again, that's one of those things that makes me take pause and kind of say, wait a minute, I'm a little bit worried about this. But everything else that they've mentioned so far I think is really exciting, impressive, and to me says this is not just going to be the same old Panzer Corps. I guess we'll see when they release it, but it to me it feels like it's not going to be the same game, which is exciting because it's so easy for companies when they make sequels to just make it a little bit prettier, few new enhancements, and it's the same game, and I'm paying for it all over again. It's exciting to see Slitherine try and do something different with this, and I'm at the very least I'm excited to see what they do with it. I just hope they don't change the campaign itself too much, because that was one of my favorite pieces about it. Right, it's a balancing act of what you want to change and what you want to keep the same, and I hope that the campaign, with all the other enhancements they're making, I hope that the campaign isn't a bridge too far of their enhancements and changes.
I like the way you added that in. But I don't know. For me, so a couple of things. One, I really like that they added there's a day and night cycle. that will have dynamic weather that will change how the map looks. And I think that's the reason why they're using it as dynamically generated, because they can use this kind of featurette. You need a dynamic map to change the way the map looks in different environments, blizzard, raining, whatever. And I think with the dynamically generated map, I don't think it's just going to say, all right, put Warsaw on the bottom and move all the things around so it's not historically accurate to, where the actual locations are. I think they have they probably put in a framework. I think dynamically generated would be I think the way they're doing it is if you're the Germans, you're moving across Poland, right? That'll dynamically generate roads and small little towns on the way to Warsaw, and combining that with the weather system and stuff like that. I think the dynamically generated map, I think it's going to work out well. I think by them doing it, they probably address the concerns of hey, we can't have Warsaw in the wrong place. Let's set up a system that it's dynamically generated, but will also, be historically accurate. There was something on the bottom that made me think. It says, doing historical battles is a potential issue due to dynamic maps unless they created them by hand. So I think they're adding a content where you can actually develop your own maps and stuff like that.
I don't know. I think it's just so what you're referring to is from this Wargamer.com article, which is talking about the DLC model. So I think that's saying hey, if they want to sell historical battles and they use this dynamic system, how are they going to do that from a selling perspective? I don't know if that means that there's a user-created custom map. I guess we'll see. But I do think, maybe the dynamic map is only for multiplayer or for, if you choose to use it too. So maybe they'll still have a historical map for the grand campaign. I guess we'll see.
I think the cool thing about dynamically generated maps too is so for example, instead of having the same scenario built, so for example, the attack on Warsaw, where Warsaw is going to be in the center or whatever, the the right portion of the map every time. So you're going to go into the scenario and the units are going to be in the same exact spot, no matter what transpired on the previous engagement. I think with dynamically map, you can have units that kind of are going down certain roads, and you can reposition Warsaw and other cities in different aspects based upon the way you are entering that part of the map. So, for example, if your task force, your army is coming from the north, Warsaw could be all the way on the south instead of just a scenario where it's always going to be on the east. You could change the way the game unfolds as you move your forces, instead of having the same scenarios where you're just replaying, and no matter how, no matter any type of modification. And the last thing I wanted to mention that I think is going to be awesome. A lot of people don't realize this, but they put this in here and it says made with Unreal Engine 4. And I played around with this engine a little bit, and I do, with Unreal Engine 4, there's a lot of perks with this by using this. One of the perks is you can make one game across numerous platforms. So you can make it for iOS, Mac, Windows, Linux. You can make one game and just redo the UI for whichever system that you wanted to perceive at. So that's going to open this game up to be able to be released on multi-platforms. I think that's going to be awesome because, you know me, I'm an iOS kind of person. So being able to play Panzer Corps 2 on my iPhone is going to be balls to the walls. Incredible.
If they do it.
Oh man, I hope oh man, that would be insane. I I was, a good example is like I was at the DMV a couple weeks ago because I always bring up the DMV. But yeah, I mean, like I was playing a couple of games at the DMV, like Ultimate General. But like a game like this is like I can kill so many hours while waiting for my number to be called. Would be incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see. I think Panzer Corps, in my opinion, was one of the better titles that they put on iPad originally. I don't know if it's still on there or not, but
it is. I was looking at it on the thing. It's actually on my iPad right now. I was playing it.
They did update it. Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, I hope they support it across multiple platforms. I'm not usually a huge iOS person, but I think this kind of a game works well. I think the other really exciting piece is the way they're talking about multiplayer. I really didn't play a ton of multiplayer for Panzer Corps. I did participate in a tournament or two, but here's what they're saying about, and again, this is all from wargamer.com. They're saying that multiplayer will allow you to play up to eight players, 7 other people, which is cool because I think today it's only 1v1. It will all play on the same map, and it will allow both player versus player and player versus environment modes, which I think is really exciting. Like if you want to get a group of friends together and you want to play as the Germans and recreate Barbarossa, maybe you have Army Group North and I've got Army Group Center and your other friend has Army Group South or whatever, and you kind of move across the map together. Or obviously playing against other people. But I mean, the player versus environment's really interesting because I've played a little bit of Steel Division by Paradox, and I have no desire to play multiplayer against other people in that game because it's frankly just I suck. But it's fun to play with friends against the computer, and I think that could be a really interesting new gameplay mode. It also is not going to be using their play-by-email system. They're going to be using a sort of real-time playthrough of their multiplayer, which is also something that Matrix has done a little bit with Battlestar and Empires Apart, but is very different from sort of the original Panzer Corps multiplayer system. So I think that's going to be really interesting to see how they do it all. It sounds like they still have a lot of open items or haven't communicated exactly what they intend. But the player-verse environment and the sort of larger scale multiplayer, I think, is really pretty cool, and I'm looking forward to it a lot.
I think I hope that with the multiplayer that they're going to do it across platforms. So, for example, if they do come out with an iPad version, that when I begin it on my iPad, I could play you that's using it on a PC. That so this way I can go cross device. So whether you're using a PC, Mac, iOS, whatever, I can play anybody on different platforms. I think that'll be. I know they did that with a couple of games, like Here's a Normandy, and I think Panzer Corps. Actually, on my iPad, I could play people that I use in the desktop version.
Yes, they have cross-platform play.
Yeah, I would love something like that, and for this game, I honestly think Panzer Corps 2 is going to be insane. I would really love. I remember they had do you remember back in the day? I remember they had Panzer-General, but they also had Pacific-General. And I know Order of Battle kind of does some of that, but I would love.
That's the interesting challenge. Is Order of Battle does all of that. So Order of Battle does the Pacific. They do the Chinese theater in the Pacific. They do with Blitzkrieg and Panzerkrieg. They do the European theater. I think they just came out with Sandstorm, which I think is the North African campaign. Like Order of Battle has surpassed Panzer Corps, in my view, as the best turn-based sort of homage to Panzer-General with some interesting enhancements like supply, front lines, those kind of things. So to me, if Matrix is trying to say, listen, Order of Battle is the newer version of this and is sort of the one that we're still pushing out new content for, then Panzer Corps 2 needs to be something experientially different. And it sounds like they're trying to do that.
Yeah, and so, I mean, let me ask you something. So, Panzer Corps 1 and Order of Battle, what are the key different features for it? Like, if I was a brand new user and I wanted to play a great European campaign, which should I choose, Panzer Corps or Order of Battle? Because you mentioned that they touched on
today Order of Battle. Order of Battle has front lines, has supply, has bases of supply, and overall is just a better, newer game in my opinion than Panzer-General. and has a lot more sort of pick what you want to play. You want to play the Russian Finnish War? They have that. They have the Winter War. You want to play just the Russian front? They have that with their DLC Panzerkrieg. You want to play the Western invasions? They have that with Blitzkrieg. You want to play just the sort of naval campaigns? They have that. You want to play the Pacific? They have that. That's what the game originally was. I think, in my opinion, Order of Battle at this point in time is, by every measure, the better game. It has basically everything that Panzer Corps has, but it has some key enhancements that do a better job of playing through World War II than Panzer Corps does. Panzer Corps is much more a puzzle game than Order of Battle is. There's still certainly a puzzliness to it, as with any of these sort of turn-based, abstracted war games or whatnot that play through campaigns in sort of a branching way. But in my opinion, Order of Battle is the better of the two today. But with all the enhancements and the changes and the tweaks that Panzer Corps 2 will end up having, I think Panzer Corps is a more true tie back to Panzer-General. I think it is much more accurate in how it represents that game. I think Order of Battle is something different, but it sounds like Panzer Corps 2 will be something very different than that, and the two may be able to coexist in Slitherine's catalog with reasonable a reasonable difference between the two, so that they're very different experiences.
What do you think is the price that they're gonna put on for Panzer Corps?
I don't know, $40.
Because I know the current one is $20. So
yeah, but the current one's been out for like 8 years, 6 years, or whatever it is now.
Yeah, I noticed games are going from 60 to 40. I feel like 40 now is like the 60 of yesterday.
I don't know if that's necessarily true. Certainly not true for AAA titles.
Yeah, well, I mean, people that have consoles. The one thing about people that have consoles, I mean, let's be honest, they're getting ripped off. A lot of people that have PC gaming or Mac gaming. The cool thing is we have Steam, so like we can get AAA titles in a bundle for like $20 in Christmas which includes probably that AAA game and numerous other ones for a low price, versus the guys who have they go to Best Buy and they're like, oh, all right, I guess I have to get Call of Duty for $60 because it's not going on sale.
Yeah, let's see here. I don't think you're right. Steam just released something to that effect where they kind of talked about how like their top 100 games make something like 80% or 90% of all Steam revenue. But then they also mentioned something about like the typical pricing of the games that make the most. If you blab about something else, I'll be able to find it. But
so while you look for that, I wanted to bring up so I found out something. I think we were chatting with. I was chatting with the guys that are doing Rome Total War for iOS. So we were having me and the Historical Gamer were talking about Rome Total War for iOS, and I think I mentioned something like I really would love it for the iPhone. Like if it was coming out for the iPhone, I would purchase it immediately. And the developer wrote back and he said that they are developing for the iPhone. I think it's going to be out this summer. And the cool thing is if you buy Rome Total War right now, you automatically get the iPhone version for free. So I was really thrilled about that. So just a nice segue that I wanted to put out there because I thought that was some awesome news.
Yeah, and sorry, to go back what we were talking about, and actually I guess this doesn't come directly from Steam, it comes to like a site that kind of monitors Steam and puts together like industry estimates or whatever on pricing and all that thing. But according to this organization, the most popular game price was $10, but the games that generated the most money on Steam were priced at either $30, which made about a quarter of all Steam revenue, or $60, which made about 20% of all Steam revenue. So
there's a bit of weight.
What? I mean, there's a weight obviously to the pricing, but I don't think $40 is the new standard. I think Paradox always releases their games at around that price, but outside of Paradox, like, most games, most AAA titles anyway, still release at around $50 to $60 Steam. Far Cry, I mean, granted, a lot of them are cross-platform, but like Far Cry was $60, Witcher 3 was $50, Skyrim was $60.
No, I mean,
Kingdom Come Deliverance was $50 or $60. Like, again, I don't think the standard launch price has really changed.
Do you get those like kind of sales that, like, so for example, Civilization 6 was on sale for $30 on Steam, and it's a relatively new game. Came out like I think 1 or 2 years ago, something like this. I don't think you get that in the console market, right? Because I mean, I know there's the PlayStation Store and there's the Xbox game store, I guess, but I don't think they have sales like that.
I mean, I don't. Yeah, theoretically, of course, you can buy used games on those systems, which you can't on PC. You can generally get them knocked way off if you buy it like used at like some eBay or GameSpy or Spot or I don't know. All I know is I wouldn't say that launch pricing is changing, but not really here nor there. So Panzer Corps 2, something that I think we're both excited about and interested in seeing more. Panzer. Sorry?
Coming out 2018 too.
Did they announce that it was 2018 for sure? There's still a lot of unknowns. So
they have it on the trailer. It says new story begins in 2018 underneath. So it could be all the way to Christmas, but sometime this year, hopefully.
Cool. Well, yeah, and another game coming out this year is Rule the Waves 2, which I'm excited about. They announced that will be launching in 2018. Not much else has been kind of revealed about that one, but couple of interesting titles that I'm excited to see coming out later this year. I think we've rambled long enough, though. We're going on an hour and 20-plus minutes now, and we've talked about a wide range of topics today, anything from Hearts of Iron and Panzer Corps to pop culture, movies, and Steam pricing. So hopefully you were all able to follow us adequately throughout this episode. As always, we are the Single Malt Strategy Podcast, so we would not be doing our job if we were not talking about something alcohol-related. What are you drinking tonight, John?
Well, I took the night off because I was drinking a lot this week, but I've been catching up on some scotch, actually. Had, what is it called? What do you call it? Glenlivet? That's what yeah,
I'll just let you struggle for a while and hand in your scotch card.
One of my coworkers at the company I work for now, and he was like, "Dude, you gotta get some Glenlivet." So I stopped by my bar in Brooklyn. I got some, and it was like delicious. Unfortunately, when you get a lot of scotch at your bar, you get a bill that's around $100, and you're like, "Holy shit!"
Yeah, don't drink scotch at a bar. You're talking about you're making fun of console gamers for getting ripped off. By the way, which I have a PlayStation 4.
But the Knicks were on, so I have to watch the Knicks at a bar. It's kind of like a rule.
I mean, if you're watching the Knicks, you probably should just be having a cheap beer or two anyway, because you're watching a cheap ass team. So
you just beat the Cavs today too. So LeBron didn't play really much, but I'm
literally the last game of the season. That's like saying someone, the Browns beat someone when all of their starters were sitting. Like, great, okay. The Browns are a bad example. They would have lost anyway. Maybe the Jets.
Put Cleveland back home.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, so you've been drinking some Glenlivet. I'm actually tonight having a vintage 2018 Niagara Falls, also known as water. Not drinking anything tonight, but just a fine glass of sparkling water.
Well, I mean, sounds sounds probably what I had better than I had today. I had Diet Coke, which was probably not. Should have got a nice cold beer for today. I just had kind of got carried away last night and mixed a little vodka, and then I had some beer, and I was like, oh gosh, I did it again. So a little bit of a hangover today.
The Russian military, the reason that they always fare so well in the winter is their antifreeze is vodka.
My father. I asked my father that because he used to I mean, he's from Poland, but he used to hang out in Russia, and they actually did that. I was like, are you kidding me? He was like, yeah.
Yep. So anyway, once again, guys, this is episode 22 of the Single Malt Strategy Podcast. Thank you for tuning in, as always. And until next time, guys, this is the Historical Gamer saying thank you for watching, or listening, or whatever you're doing. Sean, why don't you send us out?
See you guys next time. Peace out.